Hello friends, today we are going to discuss about middle cranial fossa. So in our previous class we have seen the anterior cranial fossa, the boundaries we have discussed, and today we are going to see the middle cranial fossa boundaries and contents. Middle cranial fossa anterior boundary, it is formed by the lesser wings of sphenoid bone anteriorly, and posteriorly we can identify superior border of petrous part of temporal bone, and medially we can identify the body of the sphenoid bone, and laterally we can identify greater wing of sphenoid bone anteriorly and squamous part of temporal bone. So these bones are forming the boundaries: anterior, posterior, medial and lateral. Then coming to the contents of it and how the structures are present, what are the foramina you can identify, and what are the structures passing through each and every foramina I will discuss now. So for our convenience we are going to discuss about this middle cranial fossa into two parts: medial part and lateral part. So in the medial part we can identify from anterior to posterior. We can identify a small sulcus. It is exactly present posterior to the zygum sphenoidal. So zygum sphenoidal we have seen in the anterior cranial fossa, that is flat superior surface of the sphenoid bone. Behind the zygum sphenoidal we can identify the sulcus chiasmaticus. On either side of the sulcus chiasmaticus we can identify a foramen called as optic canal, and the sulcus chiasmaticus, it is giving place to optic chiasma. Optic chiasma, it is not present in the sulcus, slightly it is present above it. Then the optic nerve is passing through the optic canal. Then behind the sulcus chiasmaticus we can identify a tuberculum sellae. You can feel the tubercle here. As I have colored this skull, you may not see clearly. In the normal skull, uncolored skull, you can identify the tuberculum sellae, which is present exactly posterior to the sulcus chiasmaticus. And the middle cranial fossa is overhanged by the lesser wings of sphenoid bone, and these lesser wings of sphenoid bone which are extending posterior-medially. But here the bony process has been broken, so you cannot see clearly, but here approximately it is present, called as anterior clinoidal process. Anterior clinoidal process. Then behind the sulcus chiasmaticus we can identify the tuberculum sellae, and then so this tuberculum sellae and other parts, these are all present over the body of sphenoid bone. Okay, then behind the tuberculum sellae you can identify a depression. You can feel the depression. So this depression, it is for the pituitary gland. It is also called as hypophyseal fossa. Hypophyseal fossa. And anterior to this hypophyseal fossa, in some bones it is prominent, a bony projection which is projecting upwards, called as middle clinoidal process. Middle clinoidal process. And from the anterior clinoidal process, which is a part of the lesser wing of sphenoid bone, and middle clinoidal process, it is connected by a ligament called as carotidoclinoid ligament. Carotidoclinoid ligament. Through this, so when these two bony processes are connected by a ligament, we can identify a foramen. Through the foramen, the internal carotid artery, it is changing its course, upturned course of internal carotid artery. It is passing through the carotidoclinoid foramen and it is extending upwards and move back and gives the branches. Then hypophyseal fossa, tuberculum sellae. So the tuberculum sellae, it gives attachment to the diaphragma sellae. It gives attachment to the diaphragma sellae, and behind this we can identify hypophyseal fossa, which is giving enlargement of the pituitary gland. Behind the Hypophyseal fossa, we can identify dorsum sellae, tuberculum sellae, hypophyseal fossa, dorsum sellae. These three things which are present medially. So from this dorsum sellae, it is a square plate. It is a square plate. From this, sometimes you can see clearly the posterior clinoidal process, a bony projection which is extending upwards, called as posterior clinoidal process. So anterior, middle, and the posterior clinoidal process. Sometimes these three joins with each other. Mostly anterior and the posterior, they are joined by a ligament called as interclinoidal ligament. Whereas between anterior and the middle, these two are connected by keratoclinoid ligament, whereas anterior and the posterior clinoidal process are connected by interclinoidal ligament. Then, what are the other structures we can identify? These things we can see medially. Then moving towards laterally. So moving towards laterally, just by the side of this dorsum sellae, we can identify a small space. The small space, through the space, the oculomotor trigone, means oculomotor and the trigeminal nerve, trochleus or oculomotor and trochlear nerve, they are passing through that. They are passing through this area, triangular area called as oculomotor trigone. And if you just touch and feel the lateral part of the dorsum sellae, we can identify a small projection here. By this, you can feel this. So a process which is present, and this process and the apex of the petrous part of temporal bone, these two are connected by a ligament called as petrosphenoid ligament. So this petrosphenoid ligament is connecting the process of the dorsum sellae and the apex of petrous part of temporal bone. These two structures are forming osteoligamentous foramen. So through this osteoligamentous foramen, you can identify the abducent nerve, and so through this petrosphenoid ligament, the abducent nerve is passing. So earlier we have seen medial to the abducent nerve, we have seen two cranial nerves which are passing, oculomotor and the trochlear nerve, and lateral to this oculomotor and trochlear, through the osteoligamentous foramen, this sixth cranial nerve abducent is passing. Okay, so these are the structures which are present just lateral to the dorsum sellae, And next thing, so what are the structures we can identify laterally? So coming to the lateral parts of the middle cranial fossa, again we have to come from anterior to posterior, as we have discussed anterior to posterior in the middle part. Here lateral part also we will see the anterior to posterior. So just behind and below the lesser wings of sphenoid, we can identify a fissure called as superior orbital fissure. We can just passing my probe into the superior orbital fissure. So the superior orbital fissure is going to divide into three compartments by ligament tendinous ring of Zinn, that is dividing the superior orbital fissure into three compartments. One is the lateral, intermediate, and the medial. So let us see the structures which are passing through the lateral compartment. There are three nerves which are passing through the lateral compartment. One is lacrimal, frontal, and trochlear, and lacrimal branch of middle meningeal artery, and recurrent meningeal branch of ophthalmic artery. So LFT and two arteries. One is lacrimal branch of middle meningeal artery and recurrent meningeal branch of ophthalmic artery. Then intermediate compartment, it is passing three nerves: nasociliary, oculomotor and abducent. So abducent nerve, after passing through the osteoligamentous foramen, that is petrosphenoid ligament, it is extending anteriorly and enters into the cavernous sinus. I will explain you what is cavernous sinus. Then after emerging out through the cavernous sinus, it is passing through the intermediate compartment of superior orbital fissure and then moves anteriorly. Okay, so intermediate compartment, it is passing the three nerves: nasociliary, oculomotor and abducent. And along with these three nerves, occasionally you may see, or sometimes it is absent, superior ophthalmic vein is passing through the intermediate compartment. And medialmost compartment, it is through this medialmost compartment, inferior ophthalmic vein is passing through this. Okay, these are the structures which are passing through superior orbital fissure. So to remember the structures passing through the superior orbital fissure, it is a mnemonic called as lateral compartment LFD, and intermediate compartment NOA, Nova, and medial compartment inferior ophthalmic vein, IV. LFD, lateral, intermediate Nova, and medially inferior ophthalmic vein. So these are the structures passing through the superior orbital fissure. Just posterolateral to this superior orbital fissure, you can identify another foramen. It is running anteriorly. So this foramen is called as foramen rotundum. So this foramen rotundum, through this foramen rotundum, you can identify this maxillary nerve is passing through the foramen rotundum. Foramen rotundum, the structure is maxillary nerve. Then posterior to this foramen rotundum, you can identify another foramen, oval shaped foramen called as foramen ovale. Then posterior to this foramen ovale, we can identify another foramen called as foramina spinosum. So ovale, through this ovale, as already have discussed about this foramen ovale in the Norma basalis, there are mandibular nerve, accessory meningeal artery, lesser petrosal nerve, if it is present, and if it is passing through this, and emissary vein, MALE, male, ovale, through this ovale, mandibular nerve, accessory meningeal vessels, lesser petrosal nerve, and emissary vein. Then posterior to this, posterolateral to the foramina ovale, we can identify small foramen called as foramina spinosum. Got it? Yes, foramina spinosum. Through this foramina spinosum, yes, here it is, middle meningeal artery, it is passing through this and enters into the cranial cavity along with that nervus spinosus. So what happens to the middle meningeal artery? Let us discuss about the middle meningeal artery. So through this foramina spinosum, I will just turn this to show you clearly what the structures are present here. Yes, through this foramina spinosum, the middle meningeal artery enters into the cranial cavity and then it ascends upwards. Exactly at the middle half of the zygomatic arch. So middle half of the zygomatic arch, if you just go deep from the mid part of the zygomatic arch and drill this skull, and you will get the division of middle meningeal artery division here. So middle meningeal artery divides into anterior and the posterior branches. So the anterior branch of middle meningeal artery, which is ascending upwards, and reaches to the pterion point. I think you know what is pterion. So pterion is a meeting point of four bones: anterior frontal, parietal above, squamous part of temporal posteriorly, and greater wing of sphenoid. So this anterior branch of middle meningeal artery is reaching to the pterion point and then extends upwards and supplies to the dura. Whereas this posterior branch of the middle meningeal artery, it is running back. It is running posteriorly and reaches to the supramastoid crest. Let me show you the supramastoid crest here from here. Yes. So here you can see the mastoid process. Here you can identify the mastoid crest. At the level of the supramastoid crest, you can identify the posterior branch is a groove for the posterior branch of middle meningeal artery. This is the groove for anterior branch of middle meningeal artery. So this is the fate of middle meningeal artery. Yes. Then you might have seen another foramen, but you might be thinking that I have not explained about it. Don't worry about it. I will explain. So another foramen, in some skulls only you can see this type of foramen. So this foramen, which is exactly present behind the foramina rotundum, So this foramen name is emissary sphenoidal foramen of Vesalius. Emissary sphenoidal foramina of Vesalius. So if this foramina is present, it is passing, emissary vein is passing through the emissary sphenoidal foramen. And sometimes you may identify another foramen between the ovale and the spinosum. So the bridge between ovale and the spinosum, on this bridge you can identify another foramen. That foramen name is called as foramina innominatus. So if the foramina is present anteromedial to the foramina ovale, that is nothing but emissary sphenoidal foramina. If the foramina is present between the bridge between the foramina ovale and the foramina spinosum, that foramen name is called as foramina innominatus. If this foramina innominatus is present, lesser petrosal nerve, instead of passing through the foramina ovale, it is passing through the foramina innominatus. That is about the course, that is about the foramens of the middle cranial fossa. Then, next coming to the inner surface of squamous part of temporal bone. So here you can see inner surface of squamous part of temporal bone. What we can identify is, these are grooves we can identify. Already I have shown you the grooves. One is posterior branch of middle meningeal artery groove we have seen. Then coming to the petrous part of temporal bone. So the petrous part of temporal bone, what we can identify is, we are coming again from medial to lateral. So this tubercle is called as tuberculum sellae. Lateral to this tuberculum, we have tuberculum sellae. We have seen one is petrosphenoid ligament and osteoligamentous foramen, and three cranial nerves you have seen. So medially oculomotor and trochlear, and laterally you have seen the abducent nerve is passing. So lateral to the abducent nerve, we can identify a small depression here. Yes. So we can identify a small depression on the petrous part of temporal bone. So that depression is called as trigeminal cave or trigeminal impression. So trigeminal impression, it is for the trigeminal ganglion. So posterolateral to the foramina lacerum. So irregular shaped foramen which is exactly present medial to this foramina ovale, if the foramina Vesalius foramina is present, medial to this one, irregular shaped foramina is present, called as foramina lacerum, posterolateral to the foramina lacerum, and lateral to this three cranial nerves, oculomotor, trochlear, and abducent, we can identify this depression, called as trigeminal impression. Okay, so, and this is called as cavum trigeminal, and the sensory and motor roots of the trigeminal, they are present here, sensory and motor roots. So trigeminal ganglion is present here. So the mandibular division, so trigeminal ganglion, it is having three divisions: oculomotor, maxillary, and mandibular. Whereas oculomotor, which is extending anteriorly and passing through this, the branches which are passing through the orbital fissure, whereas maxillary division is passing through the foramina rotundum, and mandibular division is passing through the foramen ovale. That is about trigeminal impression and cavum trigeminal. Then lateral to this trigeminal impression, we can identify this eminence. This area is called as arcuate eminence. Arcuate eminence. So what is present here is anterior semicircular canal of internal ear, or anterior semicircular canal of internal ear. So this area is called as arcuate eminence. And lateral to the arcuate eminence, we can identify tegment tympani. This entire the part is called as tegment tympani. So this tegment tympani, in the uncolored one, you can identify two foramina are present. Two foramina. One is lateral, another one is medial foramina. So the lateral foramina, which is the structure which is passing through that is lesser petrosal nerve. Medial foramina is passing greater petrosal nerve. So the lesser petrosal nerve, it is a branch of ninth cranial nerve, that is glossopharyngeal, that is lateral, and medial foramina is passing greater petrosal nerve, which is a branch of seventh cranial nerve, that is facial nerve. So these are the structures we can identify in the middle cranial fossa. Middle cranial fossa. So main structures you have to remember are, one is sulcus chiasmaticus, tuberculum sellae, hypophyseal fossa, dorsum sellae, optic canal, lesser wings of sphenoid forming anterior cranial process, then superior orbital fissure, foramina rotundum, vesalius foramina if it is present, just below behind the foramina rotundum, vesalius foramina if it is present. Otherwise directly you can identify only the foramina ovale and spinosum, foramina spinosum. Okay, then foramina lacerum most medially, then other foraminas, there are very foramina innominatus if it is present. So if the foramina innominatus is present, it has to present on the bridge between foramina ovale anteriorly, foramina spinosum posteriorly. And this vesalius or emissary sphenoidal foramen, emissary sphenoidal foramina of vesalius, which is present anteromedial to the foramina ovale. Okay, it passes emissary vein. That is about the middle cranial fossa. Thank you.